I'm Charlie DeTata from the Wanderers, and as our guest today we have Jerry Delano. And what we're going to talk about is the historic history of Delano Sawmill. Jerry, it's nice to have you.
Thank you very much for the invite.
We have done some video of a walkthrough through the sawmill.
Right.
And that was really very, very interesting. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about, first of all, how do you start? In other words, the logs have to come in.
Okay.
Maybe you can give us a little something about bringing the logs in.
Okay. Basically, we make a contract with a logging contractor who is out in the area of New England cutting mature timber, in other words, selective cutting. He in turn cuts the different types of timber, and then he sells them to the individual mill that's using that particular product. Then, in other words, we're running about 75% hardwood and 25% softwood. So every week the truckloads come in, and then they're unloaded. Do you want me to start on that? They're unloaded with a grapple, and then they're measured so that we know how many board feet is in each log, and that tells us what we're going to get out of each log. And then when we put it on the mill with this same grapple, it in turn is sawed into the dimension that the customer wants. In hardwood, it's usually dimensional. It's like 3-inch thick or 4-inch thick, and then it is shipped that way. The softwoods are separated, and they're sawed when there is spare time, not to an order, and then they're sawed out of the particular logs, and then in turn the lumber is edged, the bark is taken off the two edges, then it is put into a pile with what we call sticks, which separates it so the air goes through it and dries it, otherwise it would mold and so forth. And it takes about a year for it to dry down to be usable for products.
All right, this is what we call air-dried
material.
Compared to kiln-dried, which is done within a drying building.
That's right.
Okay. And this wood is then stacked and what we call sticked.
That's right.
So the air can circulate
through it and
through the wood.
So they continue, because in other words, if you can take and kiln dry a load of lumber and in turn take it outdoors on a damp day, and you're putting that moisture right back in, so you're right back up to air dry.
The moisture content is then...
So you have to be very, very careful on kiln dry.
Now, what you're saying is that you're cutting more like 2x4s.
That's right.
Compared to a lumber yard, which then has dimensional lumber, which is less than a normal 2x4.
That's right. That's right. In other words, we cut material that normally you won't get in a lumber yard. In other words, they may wear beams for overhead beams for decoration beams, or special sticks for paneling and things like that. But paneling is something different. It has to go through a four-sider, but we do not do that.
You don't do that. Well, I've had the experience of taking and putting 4x6s into my living room.
That's right.
And it was strictly, in fact, it was green when I put it up.
Yeah, well,
of course, after 45 years, it's pretty well dried out.
It's going to be well dried, and you're going to have expansion cracks in it.
Right, and it has. But how much does this lumber shrink in a period of, you say, a year?
Well, in a period of a year, a 12-inch board will go down about 3/8 of an inch in width.
In width.
That's right. Okay. Approximately, depending on the how fast the particular tree grew. If the tree grew very fast and the rings are close together, it won't shrink quite as much.
That's because it's a harder wood.
That's right.
The wider
the wider it is,
the softer the wood
the
is.
softer the wood is.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's interesting, and I've used your lumberyard for buying rough stock,
That's right.
and it being more than 7/8 of an inch, so it can be planed down
That's
to,
right.
to
That's
that
right.
thickness.
That's right. See, it's sawed at 1 inch, and normally it's supposed to finish at 3/4 of an inch.
3/4.
Yes, for the
Okay,
normal.
So if you want a 2x4 and you go there, you're going to get a 2x4.
Yes,
usually.
if you buy a material from our operation, it's full 2 inches by full 4 inches.
All right, and you also do specialized work, and I've seen in the yard at times 4x8s or 8x10-inch, which are big blocks.
8x8s, that's
8 by
right.
8s,
Yeah, that's right.
which are normally used in the boating.
In the boating industry, you'll notice that firms that transport boats and put them in storage, they'll set them on a stand, and under the keel, they'll put 8x8s, 2 foot long, and they'll concob them, put 2 one way and 2 the other way, and then they'll set the boat on that there. And these particular blocks, they use over and over again. The heavier blocks that you saw probably were hardwood that would go to New England Power or a Sandwich Power or someplace like that, that when they pull the dynamos apart to hold the main shaft, they have to block all this material up, and we ship that quite often to the different power plants in New England.
Okay, you have another product that you produce out of hard oak, which the engineers are
Survey stakes.
Survey stakes.
Yes, that's a byproduct, really. It used to be thrown out with the slabs, and they used to be sold for firewood, but firewood went down, and we started using cutting closer to the material, to the edge of the tree, which is usually clear, and we started making these survey stakes, and we run them through what they are is 1 inch thick, and we run them through a machine that cuts 6 at a time, and they're usually 4 foot, but we do sell 4s, 3s, and 2s. And then they're put in a machine like a pencil sharpener, and we point them, and then the surveyors, when they laying out a tract of land, you'll see them, they'll put them in the corners or anywhere in the plot, and the surveyor will mark on it, either cut so much or add so much. And one of the bigger jobs we had was Logan, a runway expansion, was over 100,000 of them went up there just for that. So, and currently they're using some on the Big Dig, and they're using some more of them now on the pipeline that's running from, there's a new pipeline, I don't know whether you realize, from Quabbin to Boston, and they're drilling that all the way from Quabbin to Boston, 200 feet under everybody's houses and things, because they only have one line there now.
Well, what you're saying is you use practically everything.
That's right.
There's hardly any parts of a tree that you don't use.
That's
in other
correct.
words, even to the mulch,
the slab for the mulch. That's
right. You chew that up.
We have a machine that grinds that up, and they use it for mulch around trees and in children's playgrounds and things like that.
All right. Another thing too is that if someone, you also do planing.
We do planing. We have a planing mill.
And you also do pallets. It's part of your. Right.
We do not do what we call a regular warehouse pallet. That is like Shaw's or all the other supermarkets use. That is a standard one that these plants are turning out by the thousands.
So you're special.
These are specialties that go to in the manufacture of commercial dryers and like that, and they start assembling the machine right on these special pallets.
You said something on our walkthrough about building a house with lumber. And that I thought was interesting because you explained the fact that you make a house with block,
Oh, yes.
brick, or
Okay,
block, you know what
okay,
we're
I know-
talking
I know
about.
what you're talking about.
Just expand that
And
because
this is some, it's a commercial for the use of wood. In other words, if you build a house of brick, they're going to dig a hole somewhere and take the clay out, form brick, fire them, and that's going to make a permanent fracture in the earth's surface. You build it of concrete, the same thing. You build it of steel, the same thing. But if you build it of wood, the only thing that is taken is a timber, a tree, and you're going to say, oh, that poor tree, you're cutting it down. Well, it renews itself every 40 years. We can cut another tree, and there's nothing in the ground, a hole, or anything else. It's just a new cycle of life.
so I think you mentioned the fact that if you went out into the woods and you found a stone wall, and there
That's,
were trees inside the stone wall,
okay, all right.
then that was the
That's how we
renewal,
tell. That's right.
renewal of the wood, that because you don't build stone walls in the woods.
No, that's correct. In other words, there's 1/3 more forest land in New England right now than there was in 1800. Because, as you say, if you see a stone wall in the woods, that was cleared land in 1800. And it's been let grow up into timberland again. So throughout the New England states, we have 1/3 more forest land than we did in the 1800.
I thought that was very
That's
interesting,
right.
and a lot of people don't realize
That's
this.
right. And it's like paper pulp. Paper in the South, they cut a lot, and that only takes 25 years to grow a crop for them. And they're harvesting just like a crop of potatoes or anything else.
Well, that kind of hits actually the workings of the sawmill that I had seen, that we had walked through. But I think now what I'd like to do is get some of the history of Delano Sawmill. Maybe where it started, when it started,
Okay.
who started it. And I know there's a lot of good history in there.
Right. Well, I'll try to pick out a few spots on it. Basically, it was started in 1922. My father saw it was by my father, Joseph K. Delano, who it's named after. And basically, if anybody wanted any logs sawed into lumber, they had to, usually, there weren't too many trucks then, but there were trucks. But most of them used horses, and they would haul them to, say, Smith Mills, where Hawes's was, or Sheehan's, where in Russell's Mills, or on Collins Corner Road, there was a mill up there. And they would saw the lumber, and then saw the logs into lumber, and then the people would go pick it up afterwards.
And what he did was he moved from...
So he decided, he bought what they call a portable mill, and he would move right to your land, and he would set the mill up in about a couple of hours, saw your logs up, and leave there in three or 4 days to the next farm.
And he went,
traveled the whole area of Dartmouth, Westport, Acushnet, and so forth. He did that almost continually for 2 years, and then the job came up down in Osterville, the golf course. They bought the island down there, and so he got a contract to cut the timber off, and they cut enough timber off of there to build the clubhouse, and sold the rest of the material to build the whole golf course, and with no debt. So that was a 2-year project, and he had, of course, the slow part was not the sawmills, it was the cutters. It was all by two-man saw, no chainsaws
No
then.
chainsaws then,
No
no, the
chainsaws
old way,
then.
right?
That's right. Nowadays, with the chainsaws and the trucks, and they can bury us with the amount of material they can haul in.
Where
They,
did-
go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask you just where your father started.
Where was the mill?
Where originally was
The first stationary was where Walmart is now.
Of course, that was the old Dartmouth. We remember it as the Dartmouth Auto Theater.
That's right. And then there was a family problem with real estate, and so we had to move out, and I won't go into that one.
No.
And we moved out, and then the Dartmouth Auto Theater moved in, and we moved on Crossroad, where we are now.
You're almost directly across, next to the fire barn.
Yes.
Or
right
actually
in
next
center.
to the old
in the shadow
Annie Collins
school. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Maybe you can expand a little bit more on you know, as you. This was 1922 when your father started.
That's right.
So,
and then they hit the Depression years, and they found that modern trucking in 1930, modern trucking was it was more reasonable to truck the logs to the mill. So it was made into a stationary mill permanently there.
Right there.
And then the logs were brought there, sawed there. And then in 38 was a big problem was with a hurricane knocked down so many trees, like in New Bedford, all the parks lost all those big hardwoods in the, so we had a contract with New Bedford, and we sawed Buttonwood Park, Brookline Park, and so forth. And they used to deliver them out to us with horses, believe it or not, in the city, transported it with horses. And then the war came around, and there was still a shortage, but nothing went for garages or things like that. There wasn't any building boom then. It was primarily the fishing fleet in New Bedford, and the farmers and the industrial plants.
When did you join your father? I know we all, and I had that experience. I joined and worked for my father when I was 10 or 12 years old.
Well, we did just about the same.
You did just about the same
When we left school, we would come home and we would get on the other end of the mill and we would help there.
Would help out. Now,
That's right.
Did you? I know you went into the service.
Yes. Then in 1942, I went into the Army, actually attached to the Navy on amphibious forces in England, and I was away for 3 years. And when I came back, I started working with my father again. And then in 1948, we formed a partnership. And then in the 50s, when my father passed on, we formed a corporation.
A corporation.
And now it's the current corporation. It's going.
Well, the corporation now includes your two sons, Jack and Jerry
That's
Jr.
right. That's right.
And I also see your grandson John out there.
That's right. Yeah.
And
that's
then, of
right.
course, you have your old reliable Bruce that's been there for years.
Bruce Thompson has been a very good worker.
Well, I remember going to Delano sawmill when I was real young.
Yeah.
And your father used to let us pick the pile.
Oh, yeah.
And his old saying was, you can pick the pile, but you got to put it back where you found it.
That's right.
And so we actually went in and picked out what we wanted, and we picked out his
That's right.
choice
Oh, yeah.
types
Why not?
of lumber.
When the opportunity
Right,
was
and
there.
then he would stack it back
That's
up,
right.
and he
That's-
would
that's
chart,
right.
figure out a
Figure
price,
out
and
your
we
board
would-
price per
right,
board foot.
Right.
And in those days, they were selling for 2 or 3 cents a foot.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, a
No
little
more.
it's a little different today, because I use quite a bit of your pine, as you know. And also, we try to use everything right down to
That's right.
almost the sawdust.
That's right.
Uh,
The only thing you don't
right.
lose is the noise.
Right, right.
That's
And you talked about logs, but when you measure a log,
right.
you measure a log that actually includes the saw kerf or the thickness of the
That's right.
blade.
That's a little sore point between the landowners and the loggers. We use what we call the international scale. It looks like a rule, it's 3 foot long, and in there it tells how many board feet we're going to get out of the log. We take it on the small end inside the bark, and in there that's allowed for 1-inch boards with a 1/4-inch saw kerf. That's the amount of sawdust. Well, theoretically, we're not paying for that sawdust.
The sawdust is going down.
So
and
that's a sore point.
Right.
But this has been going on for years. They have come out with another scale that incorporates the thing. But they back when Hawes was running in Smith Mills, they were primarily box logs that they saw, and they were shipping to Philadelphia, and where the mill that was run by water power, and they were buying, of course, by the cord measure. Then you paid for the full volume, but
Well,
in the 50s we changed over.
Okay, but there again, you say cord, and that's a strange word to some people. For someone that doesn't burn
Okay.
firewood.
All right, a cord in a log, theoretically, a log 4 feet inside the bark on the small end and 8 feet long is a cord in the log. You don't fill in the corners like you do firewood.
I see, okay.
And
All
that's
right.
a cord, and there's approximately 500 board feet of lumber in a cord of logs.
Okay. Is there anything maybe you might want to add to the history of the sawmill before we go? I'd like
Well,
to.
really, I think you can sum the whole history up by that you've had to change with the times.
Right.
When it started, it was primarily farmers and fishermen, and it has gone into industrial, heavy construction, and distance. Everything is distance for us now, where it used to be right local. And it was, we think nothing of having accounts coming out of Boston, and they send trucks down for that.
Right, well,
and we do have over 200 fishing boats on accounts. Each one has an account.
Well,
And a fishing boat, an all steel fishing boat comes up from the south, and we have to supply pen boards, checkers, and so forth to go with those.
so in the 80 years that you've been doing business,
It's been a real change.
things have changed from,
That's right.
from time
And
to
where
time.
the mill is located, it's on a side hill. And that was because when they used to come in with the log, they would come off of a truck, and you always had to roll them by
Right.
hand. And so you had a downhill movement. Now, of course,
You
it's
have
a
your-
grapple.
you have
It's
your-
all done
right, you
by
have your grapple
machine.
and all.
By the way, a grapple is like a big backhoe with fingers on it.
The fingers on it,
That's
right,
right, yeah,
right.
yeah.
I think I'm
About right.
hoping that people will enjoy the history of
I
Delano
hope so.
Sawmill. But then let's get a little personal.
Okay,
I've known you for God knows how long,
right?
but let's have a little history of, I know you're quite an interesting guy. You've worked hard for the town of Dartmouth over a period of God knows also,
Right,
and
well.
without giving your age. But you've served in a number of capacities. Give us a little bit of a history like that.
Of course, I went off in the service right after I graduated from high school, 1942. And then when I came back, I started in the mill, and then I got interested in town affairs, joined the Dartmouth Republican Committee, and Dartmouth Alumni Association. I was the president of that. and then I was active in the town meeting member, back when we used to have Judge Potter and so forth.
Right, yes. Yeah, well, I don't go back as far as you do, but we have a lot in common.
That's right, that's right.
As you're talking.
Judge Potter, and we used to meet at the old town hall down next to the police station
So you've been a town meeting member for how long?
since 1948, I think it is.
1948.
Yeah, yeah.
That's interesting. And then,
Then I I started working for Tom Hawes as a precinct worker.
Right.
Yeah, and then I became a warden, and then we both come up to be appointed as representing the Dartmouth Republican, you and I. And
Yes, I remember that.
I don't know whether it was a
But the
flip. I don't know whether it was a flip of the coin.
well, no, I think in that case they're the best
Oh,
man
come on now.
And you've
So,
been on that committee. You were on that committee for how long?
27 years.
27 years. You
Yeah.
retired just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I had forced retirement.
But then you stayed on as a precinct warden.
I'm back at Precinct 6,
And really,
taking care of the...
our lives have paralleled,
That's
really.
true, that's true.
Being town meeting member and,
That's right, that's
a
right.
lot of the committees.
That-
Although I haven't been in some of the commissions that you have.
No,
But,
I was on the Dartmouth Historical Commission. I was on the Dartmouth Resource when we formed it, that takes land and holds it in trust. I was on that, the board of directors for that for a while.
So you've been around
Yeah.
the village a little bit.
Oh, yes,
And there was a little, of course, I grew up with your sister Ann.
that's right.
We graduated from high school together.
That's right.
And we joined, I think we got together in at Gidley School.
Okay.
And every year we used to have a mock election.
Uh-huh.
And we always knew who Ann was going to vote for because she always said that she was related to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And so we knew how she was going to vote. And just give us a little bit of snippet on that.
Well, basically, Franklin D. Roosevelt was my father's 13th cousin. That's a long ways
That's a
away.
long way
long ways away. But anyway, his mother was born in Fairhaven and grew up in Fairhaven. And then she got him down to Hyde Park area and got in touch with Roosevelt, and they
eventually married.
But my father was very stubborn about this. He didn't particularly go along because he always considered Franklin Delano Roosevelt the black sheep of the family. He was an old Teddy Roosevelt man. He was an old Teddy Roosevelt.
He was an old Republican.
Yeah, that's right.
Carried on to
that's right.
later years with you. And
Yeah,
yes,
that's right. Yeah.
You know, this
And then another little snippet that might be interesting. I don't know whether you know the history about New Bedford, but New Bedford was, of course, part of Dartmouth.
Part of Dartmouth.
And the first schoolhouse that was built on Johnny Cake Hill. And not the Delanos, but my grandfather on the Wood side, we have the records of the first schoolhouse was being built. They supplied them lumber for it, and they blew the rock that it sat on. And remember Earl Wilson, the over in Fairhaven, used to write for the Standard Times.
Yes, I remember.
In 1932 or 33, he put a whole article in the Standard about this paper that we've got, and it was paid in pounds and shillings. So it goes back that far.
Well, I'll tell you, this was a great get-together.
Well, I enjoy it, Charlie.
We've been looking forward to doing this. I appreciate you coming in.
I enjoyed being in with you.
As I said earlier, this is a program that's sponsored by the Dartmouth Wanderers in a series of historical programs, and I hope that you enjoy this one and continue to watch for any of our future programs. Jerry, thanks a lot for coming in.
Okay, very good. I enjoyed every bit of it.
Thank you.
They cut you off.